Midlands, South Wales, East Anglia staying cloudy. There'll be outbreaks of rain which could turn heavy. Southwest affected by that too, and significantly cooler compared to yesterday. There'll be some showers in the far northwest, but a good part of Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England, dry and bright, just a lot fresher here. Temperatures much closer to average and certainly cooler where we've got that rain. But another warm one in the southeast. We could later today get close to 30 Celsius once more. Depends exactly how much sunshine we see. Now, as we go through the evening and overnight, that area of rain expands, so some heavy outbreaks across the Midlands, Wales, southern counties of England and East Anglia. We'll see more showers in northern Scotland, but generally across the northern half of the UK and much of Wales, it will be a dry, clear and cool night. Even in the south, temperatures quite a bit lower than they were last night, although it does take a while for your house to cool down, so it will still feel pretty warm and comfortable overnight. Temperatures won't be as high on Sunday, anything light. There will be also more showers across parts of the south. Hit and miss during tomorrow, but there will again be one or two heavy downpours. But many places will be dry and bright tomorrow with good spells of sunshine. But instead of talking about temperatures in the high 20s, low 30s, we're back in the mid to high teens. So it is turning quite a bit cooler. Plenty of fine weather in the outlook, a continued risk of some showers across the south as we go through Monday and Tuesday, but generally sunny spells and temperatures much closer to average.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV, on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello and welcome. I'm Alastair Stewart, and for the next 2 hours, I'll be keeping you company on TV and radio with the stories that really matter across the country. Today, we're looking at the political and judicial crisis over the Rwanda policy and the Home Secretary wanting out of the European Convention on Human Rights. We've invited a former diplomat, politicians, lawyers, and immigration experts to help you and me and everyone understand what it's really all about. But first, let's bring you right up to date with all of today's news. Here's Bethany Elsey.
Thanks, Alistair. Good afternoon. It's 1 minute past 12. I'm Bethany Elsey in the GB newsroom. Asylum seekers who arrive in the UK via what the Home Office describe as unnecessary and dangerous routes could be electronically tagged under new government plans. A 12-month pilot scheme has been launched in England and Wales. It will target adults who are due to be removed from the UK. Those who fail to comply with their immigration bail conditions could be taken back to detention or even prosecuted. The Prime Minister defended the plan, saying it's necessary to crack down on illegal immigration.
This is a very, very generous, welcoming country. quite right too. I'm proud of it. The government is composed of people, as you know, Tom, who trace their immediate lineage to people who've come in fear of their lives to this country. But when people come here illegally, when they break the law, it's important that we make that distinction. That's what we're doing with our Rwanda policy. That's what we're doing with making sure that asylum seekers can't just vanish into the rest of the country.
Well, Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer says it won't work and that the government is chasing headlines.
I don't want to see anybody making that dangerous journey across the Channel. And I absolutely want to see us clamp down and end the trafficking, these criminal gangs that are running this. That requires a grown-up, serious response, working with the French authorities and cracking down on the gangs upstream. I don't think the government's plans are going to achieve that.
The Home Secretary has described the European Court decision to stop the first flight due to carry asylum seekers to Rwanda as absolutely scandalous and politically motivated. Speaking to the Daily Telegraph, Priti Patel said there's a lack of transparency in the way the court operated. Judges at the European Court of Human Rights granted a last-minute injunction that effectively grounded the chartered plane on the runway at Wiltshire. Next week's rail and tube strikes are to go ahead as talks between train operators, Network Rail, and the unions fail to find a solution. Tens of thousands of rail workers are going on strike on Tuesday, Thursday and Saturday next week in a dispute over pay, jobs and conditions. Network Rail says it expects only a fifth of services to run. Tens of thousands of people are also expected to protest in London today over the rising cost of living. Research by the TUC union shows workers have lost almost £20,000 since 2008 because pay hasn't kept up with inflation. Well, our culture and social affairs editor, Anaya Falarin Iman, is at the protests in central London. Anaya, what is the mood there?
Well, it is very jubilant and excited. Approximately 1,500 people so far are assembling, but more people are gathering, organised by the Trade Union Congress against the rising cost of living. There are several different groups here. We have unions such as Unison, Unite, RMT, Equity and so on, but also other political organisations such as the Socialist Workers' Party, various different pro-EU groups. Now, this comes as the Chief Secretary to the Treasury, Simon Clarke, has said that workers cannot expect their pay to be in line with rising inflation. But workers here and many of the people that we spoke to here say that workers cannot be expected to fit the bill for what is effectively a situation that is out of their control. So we have a lot of strong views and strong viewpoints over here.
Our social affairs editor, Anaya Falarin Iman, who's in central London at those protests. Thank you for that update. Now, police in Brazil have confirmed the human remains found in the Amazon rainforest are those of missing British journalist Dom Phillips. A second body, believed to be that of Indigenous expert Bruno Pereira, is still under analysis. A local fisherman confessed to the shooting, the two men, and has been charged with their murders. Police say there could be more individuals involved. A new service has been launched to help deaf people contact the emergency services. For the first time, people will be able to video call 999 and use British Sign Language. Potential users must download an app or visit a website which will connect them with an interpreter who will relay the conversation to an emergency operator. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens now. Let's get back to Alistair.
Bethany, thank you very much indeed. Bear these two thoughts in mind for the next 2 hours. More than 100,000 of you wanted to welcome Ukrainian refugees, even offer them a home, while nearly 50% of you think the policy of sending folk who've paid criminals tens of thousands of pounds to come here by inflatables across the Channel should be sent to Rwanda. The political and judicial crisis over the Rwanda policy and UK immigration policy generally isn't just a dog whistle affair. It casts light on the relationship between the United Kingdom government, the UK courts, our continuing membership of the European Council, despite Brexit, and therefore the European Convention of Human Rights. and the convention itself. Well, this morning's newspapers are awash with the story, with two big developments you heard there in Bethany's news. In a major interview with The Telegraph, the Home Secretary Priti Patel makes it clear it's now the government's intention to leave the European Convention on Human Rights and its court that scuppered her plan to send channel migrants to Rwanda. She asserts that the lawyers were politically motivated and that it had more to do with the anti-Tory sentiments they held than with human rights. Well, the Home Office have also said that those who arrive by boat, pending deportation, could be tagged. It is all contentious stuff, no doubt. But governments, especially governments with big majorities, have a right to govern. This government, elected with a majority of 80, said in its manifesto it would control immigration. It talked about a points-based system and a continuing desire to protect those in real need, as you just heard in the Prime Minister's interview there on the tarmac, and indeed those in danger. But what's been going on in the Channel, the attitude of the French, the inability of our own border force to curb the efforts of organised criminals, making millions from people's misery with no regard for their safety, has all made the task very difficult. To say that things hit the fan last week is an understatement. The UK courts allowed the appeals of some, but it also declined to stop the policy overall outright, while allowing the appeals of some individuals. Then the Supreme Court also declined to stop the policy, pending a judicial review next month. But the European Court, nothing to do with the European Union, blocked it. The plane languishing at an RAF base, with now a tiny number of people on board who were supposed to go, didn't. It was a shambles. So, today we've assembled a brilliant cast of diplomats, politicians, lawyers, civil rights people, immigration experts and others to address some simple questions. What is the legal position? What can be done to meet the aspirations of the majority of UK voters? Controlled immigration, but with a heart. That's why I said remember the two thoughts at the top of this monologue. And how should the United Kingdom government react to the court rulings at home and abroad? Your views, your solutions, your concerns and all the rest of it are especially welcome today. You can email gbviews@gbnews.uk. You can tweet me or GB News, go on Facebook and all the rest of it. And you already started, because I did mention last night that this is what we would be talking about today. So let me just share a couple of the points before I join my guests. I'm going to start with Carol, who says, quote, something has to be done about this invasion. Her word, not mine. And that is what it is. No other party or religious group has come up with a solution other than to do nothing. Phoebe says the big difference between Ukrainian women and children coming here and the thousands of undocumented young men arriving here is that we have no idea of who these young men are, where they come from, and what their intentions are. Our own security and safety depends on knowing this. And finally, one from David at this stage. We will have time for more of them later on as the programme unfolds. David says one group are women, children and the elderly whose husbands are staying back to defend their country. The other group consists mainly of young fighting-age men. Come on, folks, says David, get real. So do keep those views coming in and also do subscribe to our YouTube channel. We are at GB News. And I'm delighted now to be joined, first of all, by an old friend of mine and this programme, Sir Christopher Mayer, former UK ambassador and also former Number 10 insider. Christopher, big view, is this a cock-up or a crisis?
I think this is a crisis that has been a long time brewing, Alistair. The potential conflict between a European Convention on Human Rights and the English tradition of parliamentary sovereignty and of the common law. These two things are ultimately not compatible. And I can remember 15 years ago going to a lawyers' conference. I was the only non-lawyer there, God spare me. And I heard 2 or 3 very distinguished barristers saying, the moment will come at some point when these two concepts, European law and English common law, are going to come into insoluble conflict. And I think that moment has arrived.
And in that moment arriving, because we've had the trickle of people coming across the channel for ages now, by bringing it to a head with the Rwanda policy, is that basically a political stunt?
No, I don't think it is a political stunt. I think it is a genuine attempt to solve what has proved so far to be an insoluble problem, to repeat myself.
Yeah.
And when I hear Keir Starmer, and I'm not making a political point here, when I hear Keir Starmer in your clip saying Boris should be doing something completely different, which includes trying to reach a resolution with the French, you want to tear your hair out. Not only have we tried for years to reach a resolution with the French, we've actually paid them 50 million quid to do better. And all this has failed. And the plain fact of the matter is, none of the political parties have a solution. The Rwanda idea might work. It might work. And if it does, we will be very pleased that it puts the traffickers, who are criminals making a fortune, out of work.
We both know, having worked together over many, many years, even going back as far as Maastricht and before that, that the ECHR is the breakpoint. We left the European Union, but we didn't leave the European Council. Now Priti Patel, in the Telegraph, has put meat on the bone. She wants out. Does that risk damaging our reputation abroad?
Yeah, it does risk damaging our reputation abroad. And you only have to hear former Remainers commenting and criticizing this move as being a denial of Winston Churchill, who was one of the motivating forces behind the creation of the European Convention on Human Rights back in, when was it, 1950. So it would do damage to our position. But the problem is not so much the European Convention on Human Rights. And I think Priti Patel is actually advocating throwing the baby out with the bathwater, and I wouldn't support it. The problem is the connecting link between the European Convention and English domestic law,
yes,
as now evinced in the Human Rights Act of 1998. What needs changing is not the convention. It doesn't mean we leave the convention. It means we adjust the Human Rights Act to take account of two fundamental things: England's parliamentary sovereignty and the primacy of common law. And without those two things, we're going to have these problems time and time again.
Isn't the simple solution, curiously enough, and it's referred to in the manifesto and it's clearly referred to by both the Prime Minister and the Home Secretary, that we craft and pass through Parliament a UK Bill of Rights that enshrines all the stuff within the European Convention on Human Rights about protecting the rights of the individual, etc., 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 but we make it a statement of UK law, England and Scotland, with separate judicial systems. Therefore, it is entirely defensible within the UK courts. You still do the right thing, but you police it in a UK way.
Well, that actually is what I'm advocating. I think that is exactly the answer. And successive Conservative party manifestos have promised to bring forward a new Bill of Rights. It looks like one is finally about to appear, and we'll see whether it actually addresses these problems, Alistair. But that is the way to go, because we don't have a written constitution on a single piece of paper, but we have some very strong constitutional principles, and one is the sovereignty of Parliament. The human rights, the European Convention on Human Rights, as it being enacted by the European Court on Human Rights, is now starting to infringe on that sovereign right, as it is also doing to English common law. And the notion that a single member of the European Court of Justice, a single judge, can, of an evening, because he is on duty, issue an interim order, not a definitive order, not a reading of the court, which then stops the Rwandan flight, is absurd. It's ludicrous. And actually, if I'd been a government advisor at the time, I would have said to them, fly the bloody plane anyway, because this is just an interim order. Stick with the English Constitution, stick with the English common law. After all, we'd done due process through our legal system beforehand. The Europeans hadn't.
Final point, and you kind of nodded to it a little bit in that answer, the degree to which it's addressing a very serious grown-up, profound, constitutional point is also being seen by many as being another example of what people are calling wedge policies, the clear blue water that Michael Portillo used to talk about. This is where we stand as Tories, they say. This is where they stand as Labour, they say. And we're different, we're better. A, do you think that's true? And B, do you think that damages the prospects of getting something really important done that does need to be done?
This is a very good point. Of course it's a wedge issue. Of course it is a wedge issue. This is one of these areas where policy and politics are inextricably entangled, and you can't separate the two threads. So I'm sure the Tory party, Boris Johnson, the British government, will hope to play this in a way that does disadvantage the Labour Party and the Lib Dems. But nonetheless, there is an essential, fundamental policy problem to which the Rwanda plan, it sounds a bit desperate and all that, to which the Rwanda plan is an answer. Can you tell me any party, anybody who's come up with a better idea?
Christopher, always a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you for breaking into your Saturday to spend time with us. Best to both of you. Thank you very much indeed. That was Sir Christopher Mayor, former UK ambassador to the United States and indeed to Germany, and also former number 10 press secretary back in the day. Next up, I'm delighted to welcome another friend of mine, Dr. Denis McShane. Denis is a former Minister of State for Europe and former Labour Member of Parliament for Rotherham. You know this stuff intimately, having been, as Christopher was an ambassador within Europe, you've been a minister there with your finger on the pulse. Do you think that this Tory government misread or forgot that we remain in the European Council and signatories to the ECHR despite being out of Europe?
Oh, absolutely not. I was the UK delegate to the Council of Europe, minister responsible for it. I can be very boring about the Council of Europe. It was indeed set up, powered through by Winston Churchill in response to what was happening in the 1930s, when British judges upholding English common law kept saying Jews couldn't come from Nazi Germany, maybe a few hundred children, the rest of them go and find asylum somewhere else. And that was the conditions where you now have gays in Iran who will be executed, hung from cranes if they're convicted of being gay, and they escape. And we're now saying we're going to dump them into a Central African country where human rights rules hardly exist. But I very much, I hope I'm a friend of Sir Christopher Mayor. I've enjoyed his hospitality. I really like him. But that wasn't Christopher I knew speaking. That was Linton Crosby, the advisor on wedge issues. And Christopher himself had the honesty to say, yes, let's drive a wedge between, on one hand, future monarch Prince Charles, the Archbishop of Canterbury, lots of liberal, decent people, the people who are taking Ukrainians in, and the people who think that any foreigner arriving in our shores somehow has to be booted out and repudiated. And believe me, the only other two European leaders who are following this policy of leaving the Council of Europe and the European Convention of Human Rights step forward, Vladimir Putin and the president of Belarus, Lukashenko. We really want to become the third pillar of these evil men who hate foreigners, who hate human rights. No, we've got to do it better. Sending people to Rwanda was just a stunt, 100% a stunt before the by-election.
But you know as well as I do that Johnson is not that man. You can criticise him as much as you want, and Patel is not that woman. Now, let me finish my point, and then you come back in again. Because we just ran in our news bulletin Boris Johnson on the tarmac in Kyiv saying, look, don't get muddled over this. We want to protect those who are genuinely in need. And the way, says Patel, of doing that is to get out of the European Convention and have our own Bill of Rights. Where is Labour's answer to that, Denis?
Well, I'm not in the Labour shadow cabinet or anything like that. You just have to look at all the other countries and democracies of the world, even the United States, which is
Denis, Denis, I don't normally interrupt, as you know, but I want to remind folk at home that you wrote a brilliant book, Why Does Labour Keep Losing? And I saw you were doing the literary festival round as well about it too. Here's why Labour is still losing, is because it doesn't come up with a genuine alternative to what the Prime Minister and the Home Secretary bring forward.
Well, I accept that fully, and it's very, very hard. I mean, I would love to say, keep out, welcome white Christian Ukrainians, keep out everybody who's brown or a bit dark. I don't think Boris Johnson, you just have to look at the composition of his cabinet, is in any way racist. I mean, I've known him, not for a nanosecond, but every other country in Europe takes far more per capita share of refugees than we do, and all we think to do is how to dump them into a Central African country, hoping they'll be forgotten. Now, it won't work because the judge in the European Court of Human Rights simply said, hey, can you just wait until you've had your judicial review? You don't need to have to dump all these people now. Wait a few weeks. And Priti Patel brilliantly has turned this into a wedge issue. We'll see if it works for her in the by-elections in Wakefield and Tiverton. And I of the view you can't do this without cooperating. But Mr. Johnson's view of cooperating with President Macron is to say, give us a break, Emmanuel, insult him. And if that's your approach, you won't get very, very far.
Can I put this to you as well, that and you and I have talked about this in the past, that immigration has always been quite an issue for the Labour Party, and I fully accept that you're not in the shadow cabinet and the caveats that you mentioned earlier on. But historically, it's been a problem where there are internationalists within the Labour Party who genuinely believe that open borders, anybody who wants to come here should be able to come here. It's a lovely free world and the rest of it. Then you had the Blairites wanting lots of people coming in because it was cheap labour, that left Gordon Brown, one of the great internationalists, stuck in a corner talking about British jobs for British workers. Labour just haven't got a grip on this.
I fully accept it is incredibly difficult to uphold those values. And believe me, before the war, Labour wasn't that keen on letting Jews into Britain either. It's much easier just to join in the anti-immigrant cries, but it actually doesn't work. If you talk about the Poles and others who are working here, we booted them all out, and now we've got the chronic labour shortages and the economic problems that so many firms work. What you have to do is have what's boringly called a plan based on agreements. And this is actually an international law. It's not a European law. The European Council of Europe has 47 members, got Turkey in it, Georgia, Azerbaijan. Nothing to do with the EU, but it's interesting how you, I think yourself, Alistair, keep calling it a European court, because European is now a bad word in the Tory lexicon. But do I say Labour has got a brilliant problem? My idea would be maybe if we started fewer wars, if we hadn't done Iraq, Libya, Syria, Afghanistan, we wouldn't have so many people fleeing from the failed state crises that we have helped to bring about. But that's do-goodism, and it wouldn't be nice if this hadn't happened. I fully accept that. No, it's a dog's breakfast for Labour. But I'm not quite sure the British people are entirely ready to say to Prince Charles, the future monarch, the Archbishop of Canterbury and every senior bishop, you're all a bunch of do-gooding, noodling liberals, bugger off. We know what we want, and we don't want them people coming down into our streets and messing us around. It is nonsense. They're weak, feebled, often the poor children actually die sometimes when there's a tragedy. Are always children. We forget about that. And we should process them faster. We should ship them back more decisively. I fully accept that. I mean, I used to deal with many, many asylum seekers. Every MP did, not me personally.
All right.
And the fire is so big, it lasts forever. And the Home Office and no government's ever got a proper grip on it. But sending them out to the middle of Africa, hoping they'll just run away and come here very fast again. Sorry,
Denis,
Alistair.
Always a pleasure. Watch the language next time you're on, please. Thank you very much indeed. But seriously, good to talk to you and keep in touch. Thank you very much indeed. Denis McShane there, former Europe Minister. And apologies for the language. It was fairly mild, but there you go. It is the weekend. You're watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and Friends. I hope you would agree with me that was a pretty balanced start to what is a difficult and testy subject that we really want to drill in today. We've lots more coming up on that later on, but we'll also be going live to North Lincolnshire, where events are taking place today to recognise and thank our armed forces. But first, let's bring you up to date with the weather.
Looking ahead to this afternoon, and the UK is looking showery at times with some sunny spells and strong winds in the far north. Let's take a look at the details. Southwest England will be cloudiest in the north and west with the risk of showery rain, drier in the south with some sunny spells. It'll be largely dry for the southeast of England with some warm sunny spells, winds strengthening through the afternoon with highs of around 28 along the south coast. Cloudy across South Wales with outbreaks of showery rain, heavy at times. A cooler day than yesterday, with highs around 17 degrees Celsius. A mostly dry afternoon for the northwest of England with sunny spells, turning cloudier from the southeast later on with the chance of 1 or 2 light showers. A fine and dry afternoon in the northeast of England with plenty of summer sunshine and light winds. Despite the sunshine, temperatures will be down on yesterday, staying at around 18 Celsius. A windy afternoon across southern Scotland with scattered light showers and sunny spells. Most of the sun will be towards East Lothian and Fife. It'll be a dry afternoon for most in Northern Ireland, but a few isolated showers creeping in from the west. It'll be breezy here with some sunny spells. Cloudy with outbreaks of rain continuing in the south, staying windy with showers for Scotland, mostly fine in between, and that's how the weather's shaping up for the rest of the day.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV,
On radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
we're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. It's just coming up to 12:30. You're watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and friends here on GB News TV and radio. Every year, Armed Forces Day is held right across the United Kingdom to show support to the men and women who make up the armed forces community, Air Force, Navy and Army, from those currently in service to veterans, cadets and their families. While the official Armed Forces Day is next Saturday, many communities around the country are recognising their service people with events today instead. And this year is a special one, marking 100 years of the Royal British Legion and 100 years of the Royal Artillery Association. Our Yorkshire and Humber reporter Anna Riley is in Scunthorpe now covering their Armed Forces Day. Anna, goodness gracious me, pretty impressive guests. Over to you.
Right, we're going to try and do the about turn again.
Good afternoon, Alistair. Yes, there's been a fantastic turnout here in Scunthorpe. Thousands of people have come from around the community to support our armed forces. I'm joined by Sir Reggie Turrett. It's a really important one this year, isn't it, this Armed Forces Day?
It is. Good afternoon. We're not only celebrating Her Majesty the Queen's Platinum Jubilee, but we're also celebrating 100 years of the Royal British Legion, and also, I believe, 100 years of the Royal Artillery Association. So it's a very important day.
And why do you think it is important to show support for our veterans and also our serving armed forces?
We owe our thanks to our armed forces community, especially our local armed forces community, be they serving armed forces, reservists, or the cadets who've done a fantastic job today on parade, and it's been a wonderful day today.
Thank you. And Major Damien Hardy, you're here on a recruitment drive, aren't you?
Yeah, good afternoon, Anna. The Army Reserve now is becoming more and more an integral part of the armed forces, whether that's the integration of the regulars and the reserve, which is working really closely now, and also there's a whole force kind of environment where that's also involves civilian contractors as well. We're here today to grow the reserve and see both to display our equipment and also to talk about some of the opportunities that we've got for people who are interested in joining the reserve. We'd be very keen to come and talk to them. There's a lot they can get out of it.
And what can people get out of it?
Well, I've been a reservist for 35 years and I managed to I've had a motorbike licence out of it. I got to learn how to drive HGV trucks. I've got a Class 1 licence. And I also qualified, I did a Level 7 diploma in Strategic Leadership and Management. So for me, and it builds confidence, gives you a real sense of belonging. It's an excellent opportunity for anybody who's looking to join.
Thank you both for taking the time to speak with me.
Thank you.
There you have it, Alistair, a fantastic day here in Scunthorpe celebrating our armed forces.
Totally agree. Congratulations to all of them, and through you, Anna, huge thanks to the Deputy Lord Lieutenant and the senior army man there as well. Great to hear from both of them. That was Anna Riley, our Yorkshire and Humber reporter, with her guests. You're watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and Friends. After the break, we'll be looking at how we can live within our means as the cost of living crisis bites ever deeper. But first, let's bring you right up to date with all of today's news. Here once again is Bethany Elsey.
Thanks, Alistair. Good afternoon. It's 34 minutes past 12. I'm Bethany Elsey in the GB Newsroom. Asylum seekers who arrive in the UK via what the Home Office describe as unnecessary and dangerous routes could be electronically tagged under new government plans. A 12-month pilot scheme has been launched in England and Wales. It will target adults who are due to be removed from the UK. Those who fail to comply with their immigration bail conditions could be taken back to detention or even prosecuted. Next week's rail and tube strikes will go ahead as last-ditch talks between train operators, Network Rail and the unions have failed to find a solution. Tens of thousands of rail workers will strike on Tuesday, Thursday and Saturday next week. It's in a dispute over paid jobs and conditions. Network Rail says it expects only a fifth of services to run. Hundreds of protesters have gathered in central London this afternoon, demanding government action over the rising cost of living. Research by the TUC union claims workers have lost almost £20,000 since 2008 because pay hasn't kept up with inflation. And Boris Johnson says he hopes Ukraine can host the Eurovision Song Contest next year. After returning from a surprise trip to Kiev, the Prime Minister said Ukraine deserved to host the event after it won this year's competition. The BBC is reportedly in talks with the European Broadcasting Union about hosting the event next year in the UK due to the conflict in Ukraine. On TV, online and DAB plus radio, this is GB News. Let's get back to Alastair Stewart in just a moment.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV,
on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
every morning from 6 o'clock. We'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. It's 23 minutes to 1 and you're watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and friends here on GB News TV and radio. Now, I also tweeted about the issue regarding HMRC and the employment of more diversity and inclusion staff, which we'll be talking about shortly. My slightly tongue-in-cheek point was that perhaps they could spend any money that they've got to spare on employing more people who answer the telephone. I didn't realise there'd be quite such a reaction, but there was. Richard says, diversity issues are very important, but you shouldn't need to manage diversity. Senior staff are paid enough to have in their job descriptions the responsibility to address the need for equality and fairness in their organisation. If not, the system is at fault, in my opinion. Very strongly put. Louise joins in. What's wrong with our society now creating jobs for roles that produce nothing, while vacancies for real jobs cannot be filled? Dan says HMRC and government offices deal with everyone across the United Kingdom, literally all the diversity possible. If they can be more attuned to the myriad needs of the people, then it's a good thing. Fund them properly. Stop spending money on flights to Rwanda. We put that one in there because it kind of weaves in the other main topic that we're talking about. Kitty says, what a waste of my hard-earned money paid to the taxman. And here I was thinking it was spent on making the country a safer place. Don't we have a say in where our money goes? Yes, you do, once every 5 years. Anthony says, been waiting a week for a call back. Diversity seems to be an excuse to not work. Well, there you go. That's some of the thoughts. Do keep your views coming in and do subscribe to our YouTube channel. We are at GB News. Catch up on previous programmes and previous interviews as well. Now, before we move on to that issue on HMRC, this week I got an email from my electricity supplier. It happens to be Shell. I was with one that went broke. I'm now with Shell. It reminded me of what the government was spending billions of pounds of our money on to help us weather the cost of living crisis. I guess it's designed to help us pay our electricity and our gas bills, but it's of course up to you how you spend it. Here's the email. So there it is. Make sure you receive the support that you need, they said. And then they go on to list, this is the things that the government have done, 400 quid discount on autumn energy bills, but it's 400 quid you spend how you want to. One-off payment of 650 for households on certain means-tested benefit, 150 if you're in Band AD council tax, one-off payment of 150 for those receiving disability benefits, and one-off payment of £300 to pensioner households. And it went on talking about what Shell itself is offering. Anyway, I thought that was fascinating, and I thought it was a really good example of customer service relationships. So thank you, Shell, and I hope all of the other energy companies are doing exactly the same thing. But one step back, what do you do with that money if you are going to receive some of it? All of us will get some, and depending upon our means, where we live, and our age, it'll be more and more and more, you may tick all of the boxes. So I just thought it might be useful to run through that at a time of difficulty. And so I asked personal finance expert Isabel Lawrence to help me out. Can we be clear from the outset that the total here isn't huge for any one individual household? The total in terms of billions of pounds spent by the government really is. But when you look at that, is it your view that literally every little helps in the current circumstances?
Absolutely. I think, it does help to an extent, but they're saying, we'll get the first of 2 payments from the £650 universal credit payment. So we'll get £326 in July and the rest in autumn. So if autumn is October, for example, that's got to stretch over 4 months. So that's only £81 extra a month. So, it helps to an extent, but it's not quite enough. So I think people will still be really struggling. £81 might not even cover their bills. So, to an extent, it's not helping really. It might help some people, like you say, everyone's circumstances are different. But for some people, it's really not going to make a huge difference.
But as a personal finance expert, do you think, as some people have argued, it would have been better to pay it all in one go, or the other extreme argument is kind of drip feed it even more slowly across many, many payments, rather like universal credit or something like that? What would help folk do the right thing?
I think it's good that it's split into 2. But, it's different. So, like I said, everyone's different. So for some people, that £650 in one go could have been great. It could have paid off a really big chunk of debt they have, for example. It could have got some essentials in the house, children's clothing, food for children, baby supplies, things that they really need. But for others, I think it would be it's a really good way to, like you say, sort of drip feed the money in, and it sort of comes over a couple of months. So, it's still not a great help, but it definitely helps. I think also there is that temptation when you get a huge chunk of money to, not potentially spend it on essentials. You might.
Well, I heard a fascinating conversation on the media a couple of days ago, and I can't remember who it was who was speaking. It may have been Martin Lewis. It doesn't matter. But anyway, someone like you, who's an expert in the field, said, what it demands is that we bring back the old budgeting system of having 3 tins. One is marked electricity and gas, one is marked rent, and one is marked food. And you divide the money up into the 3 tins, and you never, ever spend a penny piece in one of those tins on anything that isn't written on the outside of the tin. I mean, it sounds so old-fashioned, but, it still makes sense.
Absolutely. I always recommend budgeting to everyone, no matter what your circumstance, no matter who you are, how much you earn. Budgeting is a great thing. And I think especially in these times, budgeting is more important than ever. You've got to really choose what you're going to spend on and, focus that money on that spending in particular. So you might split some of it into bills, some of it into council tax, some of it into food. As long as you're covering all bases, it's really great to budget. I would definitely say to people, choose the one thing, if there's something in particular you're really worried about, for example, your energy bills, maybe pop a bit more in there. Choose what, there might be something for you that is really worrying you, and maybe prioritise that, but definitely put a little bit in each pot. Don't just all put it into one thing or the other. Spread it around and, just have that little bit extra for each part of your life.
Do you sense that we are getting smarter as a result of this crisis? I mean, we've talked about all sorts of things on this programme, like long-term grow your own vegetables, shop around, obviously, look at whether club cards, and we had a lovely interview a wee while ago with the woman who created the Tesco club card. Other supermarkets are available and other discount cards. But there are a lot of savings out there that can be had. Do you sense as an expert in the field that we collectively are getting smarter at living within our means?
Absolutely. I totally think so. I get emails and messages every day of people saying, oh, did you know about this tip? Oh, did you know that this is happening at this supermarket? Or there's some bargains here, or I found a really great way to spend some money. And I think people are becoming, we've all got that sort of inner ability to budget. And, we've all had a time in our lives where we've had to, pay rent and bills, and we've had to split our money anyway. But now that money is so tight for us all, people are really, they're using their initiative, and they're finding really clever ways to shop, to spend, to save, and manage their money. And I think to an extent, when hopefully everything will settle down in the next few years, that we can continue to take these ideas into the future and build a future.
Relearn good habits and stick to them. Final question. The other big event during the week was, it wasn't a huge increase in interest rates, but after years and years of very, very low, virtually zero interest rates, it looks bigger. And I'm of an age who can remember big double-figure interest rates back in the days of Nigel Lawson and the rest of it. But as an expert talking to folk out there, how worried should we be? Avoiding putting things on credit card and letting that build up. Most of us are not going to have a problem if we're lucky enough to have mortgages, because I think it's something like 70-80% of people are now on fixed mortgages, so that's not going to change. But general thought to finish with, how worried should we be about rising interest
I think it is a big worry. I'm not saying panic, start panicking, start, getting really anxious about it. They are going to go up again, likely in the future. It is just, something that hopefully it will bring inflation down again. So they put the interest rates up to curb consumer demand and consumer spending. And as demand goes down, hopefully inflation and prices will go down as well. So yes, it is a huge anxiety-inducing thing. But I think just think about the long term. It's being done for a reason, and it should really hopefully curb inflation in the long run. So, it's easier said than done, but sit tight and, hopefully it will do its thing. And in the next few years, inflation will, come back down again, and costs will come back down again.
Fingers crossed. A real pleasure. Did exactly what I'd hoped it would do, that conversation. Some helpful expert, but entirely impartial guidance. Isabel, great to see you. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. That was Isabel Lawrence, financial journalist and personal finance expert. Now, as I said before we had that conversation, Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs, HMRC, are advertising for diversity managers, the posts paying up to £50,000 a year. The news caused a bit of a storm, not least from those who feel it's all a bit overdone, but even more from those who felt, whilst it may be a jolly good thing to have better diversity and the rest of it, if there is money for recruitment, perhaps people answering the telephones might be a better investment. So I took a deep breath and invited Elliot Keck, Investigations Campaign Manager at the Taxpayers Alliance, to join me first. I have been accused of being anti-diversity and reactionary for saying that. I genuinely am not, as you well know, because we've talked in the past, and anyone who knows me knows that that simply is the case. But is this about diversity within HMRC's own ranks, or is it about how they deal with different clients and different customers? What's your take?
Well, firstly, thank you very much for having me back on. And unsurprisingly, your viewers are bang on the money. Richard made the point that diversity and inclusion is something that HMRC obviously has to take seriously. It's bound to under the Equalities Act, but it's also bound to just under basic principles of morality and recognising that we want workplaces and we want public bodies that can be diverse and inclusive places. But these are tasks and responsibilities that should be capable of being fulfilled within the existing HR structures. And to see 3 diversity hires after a further diversity hire we revealed back in April is questionable. And given the year that HMRC is having so far, it was slammed by the Public Accounts Committee back in February for its role over things like COVID fraud. Its chief executive in February at the Treasury Select Committee claimed that it didn't have the resources to man the phones properly, and that was a reason why 1 in 5 callers don't get through, and it's a reason why half of people that write to HMRC don't receive an answer in 15 days. So I think HMRC really does need to consider, is this the best use of resources given the year it's having?
I totally agree with that, and that was, you explained that in a really nice, positive, balanced way rather than just kicking it one way or t'other. Because the other thing that strikes me very powerfully is that wanting to do the right thing by the taxman and woman is getting a lot more complicated. The tax code is crazy, goes on for volume after volume, and the benefit system is making it even more difficult with tapers and the rest of it. Shouldn't that be where any spare cash is being spent, to simplify it and have more advisors to make sure you pay what you owe, but you don't pay more than you owe?
Oh, you're spot on. I don't think taxpayers are going to find it a particular sweetener when it gets to the end of the month and they're paying even more money into HMRC's coffers to know that HMRC is doing it in a diverse, equal and inclusive way. So, I mean, I think, yeah, you're absolutely right. Taxes need to be simpler. They need to be fairer. They need to be lower. And hiring more quality, diversity, inclusion managers is not going to be a serious strategy to achieving that aim.
Me, Elliot. We were talking earlier on about whether Rwanda was a wedge issue and whether it was kind of knee-jerk politics and the rest of it. I cannot remember a political party that made it a manifesto pledge to simplify the tax system and make it easier for those of us who want to do the right thing, as well as catching those who don't, but just to make it easier.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, and to be fair, I don't actually think that equality, diversity, and inclusion is the sort of wedge issue that some people may think. I think most people recognise it's a serious issue, but they just don't want to see hundreds of thousands, millions of pounds spent on roles, busybodies where this is all they're doing. And the priority of government should be to find ways to deliver good quality public services at the lowest possible cost. And that the lowest possible cost means the lowest possible cost to the taxpayer. It means the lowest possible cost to our back pockets. And it means more money every month for Brits, individuals, families, whoever they are in this country. And that is the only answer. That's the one thing the government should be focusing on, not hiring yet more equality, diversity and inclusion officers.
Yeah. Let me finish by just giving you one, and it's a very personal example of it. I was chatting to my eldest son the other day, who he's a freelance writer and writes about football and stuff like that. But he was saying to me that the online tax return system is a dream. He said it's simple, it's reactive, and it's very, very quick. You don't have to talk to people because it has a series of codes that say if you're stuck on this one, here's the answer to it. Could that system lend itself even to people who have slightly more complicated tax affairs, perhaps, because it really is the devil's own job of trying to get answers and questions dealt with by human beings?
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, HMRC should be absolutely committed to making the tax code as simple as possible and to make it as easy as possible for everybody to work out exactly what they need to pay and when and what they're paying for.
Brilliant. Elliot, great to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed for casting light upon that. And I hope we both sang the praises of the HMRC where it is appropriate, but just tweaked them very slightly where we thought it wasn't. Thanks. Good to see you. Elliot Keck there, the investigations campaign manager at the Taxpayers Alliance. And you have still been sending in your emails and tweets thick and fast about our discussion on the failed deportation of refugees to Rwanda. So here's a few more of your thoughts. Jim says, perhaps you should ask why they come here, because it's easy money. I have had to assist clients who've taken all the benefits, don't pay their rent, so they could send all of our money back to their country. For me, that's not right. The UK is an easy target and something has to give. Eddie says the honest truth is that the UK government have failed to execute this policy. Blaming the ECHR is a convenient excuse. How could removing only a handful of men discourage others from coming? Why have the government not tackled this matter in a variety of ways to fulfil their own manifesto and policy commitments? Had the plane flown to Rwanda with 6 or 7 migrants, would this really have been considered a success? Keith says the only reason for these people wanting to come to our country is after their own language. They are taught English. If they didn't put them up in nice hotels most of the time and made them stay in a purpose-built compound with just the basic things, it wouldn't look such a good deal. I think that's a bit harsh, but tie those two together. And at the heart of the Rwanda policy, and I'm not taking sides on it, is the idea that this is what may happen to you if you take the risk of giving a criminal a lot of money to come across on an inflatable. It's not the best solution to it. Putting people into genuine hardship if they are in genuine need perhaps is pushing that a little bit too far. But I may well be wrong. Do let me know So you can tweet me, you can tweet GB News, or you can send us an email, gbviews@gbnews.uk. And again, please don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. We are at GB News. And you are indeed watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and Friends here on GB News TV and radio. Plenty more still to come, so do please stay with us.
Looking ahead to this afternoon, and the UK is looking showery at times with some sunny spells and strong winds in the far north. Let's take a look at the details. Southwest England will be cloudiest in the north and west with the risk of showery rain, drier in the south with some sunny spells. It'll be largely dry for the southeast of England with some warm sunny spells, winds strengthening through the afternoon with highs of around 28 along the south coast. Cloudy across South Wales with outbreaks of showery rain, heavy at times. A cooler day than yesterday, with highs around 17 degrees Celsius. A mostly dry afternoon for the northwest of England with sunny spells, turning cloudier from the southeast later on with the chance of 1 or 2 light showers. A fine and dry afternoon in the northeast of England with plenty of summer sunshine and light winds. Despite the sunshine, temperatures will be down on yesterday, staying at around 18 Celsius. A windy afternoon across southern Scotland with scattered light showers and sunny spells. Most of the sun will be towards East Lothian and Fife. It'll be a dry afternoon for most in Northern Ireland, but a few isolated showers creeping in from the west. It'll be breezy here with some sunny spells. Cloudy with outbreaks of rain continuing in the south, staying windy with showers for Scotland, mostly fine in between, and that's how the weather's shaping up for the rest of the day.
I'm Alex Phillips. Join me weekdays between 2 o'clock and 3 o'clock for We Need to Talk About.
We don't need to apologise for our point of view. Things have got to change.
We're going to be covering topics that other broadcasters wouldn't dare to air. And there's a lot out there that definitely needs discussion. So join me on GB News between 2 and 3 o'clock on weekdays.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV,
on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
we're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello and welcome if you've just joined us. Hello and welcome back if you've been with us since midday. It's just a few seconds past 1 o'clock. I am Alastair Stewart and we are into the second and final hour of our programme. I'll be keeping you company here on TV and radio with plenty more still to come, including more on our top discussion on the Rwanda policy. This hour we'll be looking at the law surrounding it. Plus, Sir Paul McCartney has celebrated his 80th birthday by performing to a crowd of 60,000 people. And Kate Bush has made it to the top of the charts with a song released 37 years ago. So, when it comes to music, are the oldies still the goldies? All of that still to come, but first let's bring you right up to date with all of the news. Here once again is Bethany.
Thanks, Alistair. Good afternoon. It's just gone 1 o'clock. I'm Bethany Elsey, here to get you up to date on GB News. Some people who arrive to the UK via small boats crossing the Channel or in lorries could be electronically tagged under new government plans. A 12-month pilot scheme has been launched in England and Wales. It will target adults who are due to be removed from the UK. Those who fail to comply with their immigration bail conditions could be taken back to detention or even prosecuted. The Prime Minister has defended the plans, saying it's necessary to crack down on illegal immigration.
This is a very, very generous, welcoming country. Quite right too. I'm proud of it. The government is composed of people, as you know, Tom, who trace their immediate lineage to people who've come in fear of their lives to this country. But when people come here illegally, when they break the law, it's important that we make that distinction. That's what we're doing with our Rwanda policy. That's what we're doing with making sure that asylum seekers can't just vanish into the rest of the country.
The Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, says it won't work and that the government is chasing headlines.
I don't want to see anybody making that dangerous journey across the Channel. And I absolutely want to see us clamp down and end the trafficking, these criminal gangs that are running this. That requires a grown-up, serious response, working with the French authorities and cracking down on the gangs upstream. I don't think the government's plans are going to achieve that.
Next week's rail and tube strikes will go ahead as talks between train operators, Network Rail and the unions have failed to find a solution. Tens of thousands of rail workers will go on strike on Tuesday, Thursday and Saturday next week in a dispute over pay, jobs and conditions. Network Rail says it expects only a fifth of services to run. Tens of thousands of people have been protesting in London today over the rising cost of living. Research by the TUC union shows workers have lost almost £20,000 since 2008 because pay hasn't kept up with inflation.
We had a decade of austerity and most of our families lost about 10% over that decade. This year, we're on track to lose 10% in 1 year, 10 times as bad as what we've had in the last 10 years. So I think, regretfully, industrial action is necessary. I think more's coming, because it's not just the RMT workers next week. Communication workers union, the postal workers, as well as the telecoms are balloting. Even the doctors are talking about balloting.
That was the National Chair of the Trade Unionist and Socialist Coalition, Dave Nellist. In other news, police in Brazil have confirmed the human remains found in the Amazon rainforest are those of missing British journalist Dom Phillips. A second body, believed to be that of Indigenous expert Bruno Pereira, is still under analysis. A local fisherman confessed to the shooting of the two men and has been charged with their murders. Police say there could be more individuals involved. A new service has been launched to help deaf people contact the emergency services. For the first time, people will be able to video call 999 and use British Sign Language. Potential users must download an app or visit a website to be connected with an interpreter who will relay the conversation to an emergency operator. And Boris Johnson says he hopes Ukraine can host the Eurovision Song Contest next year. After returning from a surprise trip to Kiev, the Prime Minister said that Ukraine deserves to host the event as it won this year's competition. The BBC is reportedly in talks with the European Broadcasting Union about hosting the event next year in the UK due to the conflict in the country. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens now. Let's get back to Alistair.
Bethany, thank you very much indeed. 1:05 and back to our top discussion that we're having today, the Rwanda policy. The stories splashed right across the newspapers this morning with two major developments. The Home Office has said, as you heard in Bethany's news, that those who arrive by boat pending deportation could be tagged. And in a major interview with the Daily Telegraph, the Home Secretary herself, Priti Patel, suggests the government could leave the European Convention on Human Rights and its court after it scuppered the plans to send migrants to Rwanda. So, last hour and this hour, we're looking at the law and the legal obstacles surrounding all of this. And I'm delighted to be joined now by Ivan Sampson, who is a specialist immigration lawyer. Ivan's made has more than 20 years experience in advising individuals on immigration requirements for global relocation, and importantly assists companies on immigration advice. Ivan, great to see you, and welcome this afternoon. I found it slightly odd that the UK courts didn't block the policy outright, but the ECHR did. That's what's angering so many people.
Well, that's not strictly true. The ECHR didn't make a ruling on the policy. The application was for an interim injunction preventing the removal of the Rwandan asylum seekers. The core issues, which is whether the policy itself is unlawful, will be considered in a few weeks. So this was just an interim ruling preventing their removal.
Is it, in your position, and I underlined clearly the years of experience that you have in this field, do you understand as a lawyer the anger that some people felt that a government that they had elected could not enact a policy that they had supported because of a court meeting in the late hours in Strasbourg and just saying, no, this can't happen, even if it was subject to the Supreme Court and the judicial review and the rest of it? Do you understand that anger on the street?
Yes, I do, but we've got to comply with the law as it stands today. The government could bring in new statutes. Yeah. I mean, the government could withdraw us from the European Convention on Human Rights. I don't think that's ever going to happen. It's literally impossible for this country to withdraw from the ECHR. And the reason is that we are members of the Council of Europe. We drafted that treaty. It will be akin to Russia and Belarus, who are the two member states not signed up to the treaty. We'd be like a pariah state. Is that the look that we want to send out to the world, that we don't respect human rights? I don't think that's going to happen. It's all political. I think it's gesturing by the government to say, look, we've tried to do it, but we've got blocked. Yeah. So, no, I'd be very surprised if we ever came out of the convention.
That's absolutely fascinating, because Priti Patel's argument herself very much is that we want to retain the good stuff that is in that convention. And as everybody has been saying, go back to the 50s and Churchill, and it's a very British thing as well. And lots of it is the right thing to do. But she wants to say, get out of that and enshrine it in a new UK/British/England and Scotland Bill of Rights. Surely that is the way forward, or are you saying that's simply impossible?
No, I'd be very surprised if that happened. The convention
hang on a minute. For legal reasons, Ivan, or for political reasons?
Oh, no, legally they can do that, absolutely. We're a sovereign state, and we can enact laws. We elect governments to do that. To take us out of the convention with all its jurisprudence, it's going to be a task in itself. Look, the reality is, in the last 30 years, asylum applications have constantly reduced. We're at the lowest level of the number of asylum seekers seeking refugee in the UK. Back in 2000, it was 100,000 people. It's around 25,000. We can more than cope with it. What Priti Patel should be doing is talking to the French, having a bilateral treatment so that we can send people back to France to have their asylum applications heard there. And we could have done that before while we were members of the EU. But we can't now, because since we left, the Dublin Convention, which allowed us to take people back to France, doesn't apply. So Priti Patel should be focusing on talking to the French and having a bilateral agreement.
Christopher Mayer, former ambassador and used to work in Number 10 back in the day of John Major, was saying that his eyes rolled to the back of his head when he heard Labour. I'm not saying you're Labour, you're a lawyer, and that's why we've asked you to come and join the conversation. But he said his eyes rolled to the back of his head when he heard Labour say, talk to the French. Christopher's point was, we have been talking to the French forever and a day.
No, look, it's bad planning. We knew we were coming out of the EU. We knew this was happening. We knew the Dublin Convention would not apply post-Brexit. With all that knowledge, there was just simply no planning. And we find ourselves in a mess now because previously we were returning around 70,000 people back to France. So far, we've returned 0 since we left the European Union. So it's just bad planning on the part of the Home Office. Look, we've got 500,000 illegal people in this country. Estimates around that sort of. We're not focusing on addressing that huge problem and trying really to attack not that many refugees coming every year who are seeking protection from persecution. So this is all political by the government. Before, people were coming on the lorries. We couldn't see them. See no evil, hear no evil. It's so visible now with people coming across on the boats. The government is forced to do something. But the numbers are actually less than there were 2 years ago. Those are the facts.
Sure. Fascinating that and I didn't interrupt you because, as you say, those are the facts and that's important that folk know that. But while you were talking, Ivan, we were running some pictures of people crowded into a dinghy and a lifeboat sailing alongside them. Do you accept the argument made by ministers that part of this policy, Rwanda, unpleasant though it is in some people's mind, and Christopher Mayer said I'd have sent the plane and have the argument afterwards, it is to make it just not worth the risk to pay large amounts of money to criminals and to risk your own life getting into one of those inflatables. Do you accept there's any merit in that argument?
No, there is no merit. I don't believe there is, because the core reason people come to the UK, majority of asylum seekers are coming here for 2 reasons. One, that we uphold the rule of law here. And 2, because they've got family here. And that's what drives them to come here. It's the families who are sending money back to their relatives to bring them over here. So I would be very surprised if the numbers get less. I mean, look, they'll take a risk. If you're fleeing persecution and your life's in danger, you're not going to worry about Rwanda policy. You'll deal with it when you arrive here. Look, the policy is a collective measure. And this is a problem with human rights. Human rights are individual rights. So when you have a collective policy, the courts for time and time will rule it to be unlawful. And the government lawyers just haven't got a grasp of this. The court, when they look at this in July, will, in my view, render this policy unlawful.
Ivan Sampson, it has been a genuine pleasure talking to you. I agree with a lot of what you said. I didn't agree with all of it, and I hope I made that crystal clear. But that was genuinely enlightening and factual. So thank you very much indeed for finding time for us this Saturday afternoon. You keep in touch with us as well. Thank you. So that was Ivan Sampson, a specialist immigration lawyer at Privatus. And let me just underline one thing that he said in the middle of it. And I think both Denis McShane and Christopher talked about it, Christopher Mayer at the beginning of the programme as well. Whatever happens right here and right now, there will be a judicial review of this policy, potentially right up to the level of our own Supreme Court, and that is at the end of July. So it's doubly important that you continue letting your views be known, how you feel about this policy and what you do and don't want done, but it will still be in the hands of the judiciary. It's Priti Patel and the politicians who are saying, let's change the law. And I think it's probably right and proper that you express your views and perhaps have a say. You've certainly been having a say this morning. You've been pounding away at the old typewriters and the keyboards and the phones. Let me share some of your other thoughts on the discussion that the failed deportation of refugees to Rwanda. Here's what some of you have said. Derek, Border Force should pick up illegal migrants soon as they are in our waters, then take them to the ferry going back to France. They should be offloaded without stepping on our land and given £10 for a sandwich. I don't know where that came from, but there we are. Security on the boat will make sure that they get off once they are back in France. Job done. I'm not quite sure it is as simple as that, but that's your view, and we share all views on GB News. The problem with our being members of the ECHR is a simple one, in my view. Following our decision to leave the common market, European Union, we were always going to struggle. The ECHR will simply weaponise our membership in order to further punish the United Kingdom. They will try to ruin this once great country of ours at every opportunity. So there we are. Goodness me, you've had some strong views this morning on all sides of the argument, and I'm honoured and delighted to share them. We're on air for another 45 minutes or so, so keep them coming. We'll try and find some more time at the end of the programme to share some more of them back. And don't forget, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel. I mentioned Denis McShane and Christopher Mayer and other interviews I've done. All of the programmes are there on our YouTube channel, so you can also pick up or listen back to what they said on that. It's GB News on our YouTube channel. Do subscribe to it. Now, again, as you heard in Bethany's news, the rail and tube strikes are set to go ahead next week, threatening to cause transport chaos as talks between the train operators, Network Rail and the trade unions failed this morning to find a solution. Tens of thousands of rail workers are going to go on strike for 3 days next week in a dispute over pay, jobs and conditions. So let's talk about it, not just how it will get to affect you getting around over the next few weeks, but more about what it really is all about. And I'm delighted to be joined now by John Rentoul, Chief Political Commentator at The Independent. John, good to see you. Nobody can dispute that in this industry that is still going through revolution, transformation, restructuring, the rest of it, there are some jobs at risk. Grant Shapps has said this is about modernisation, and the rail workers do face inflation like the rest of us. But they have the power to put the boot in, which many of us don't. In your view, do they have a case?
Well, not a very strong one, in my view. But as you say, they have the industrial muscle to bring the rail network to a halt. And that causes the government a problem. And so far, the government's solution to this problem is to pretend that this is nothing to do with them and to call them labour strikes, which is absolutely extraordinary. And I hope they don't get away with it.
When you say labour strikes, you mean labour with a capital L?
With a capital L. They're pretending that this is somehow the responsibility of Her Majesty's loyal opposition, whereas it is the government that's in charge, as Keir Starmer pointed out at Prime Minister's Questions this week. The rail network is in effect nationalised in this country, and the tube is obviously in the public sector. This is the government's problem, and the government has to sort it out. And it's no use trying to pretend that it's somebody else's problem.
But one step back in that, I mean, in a sense, even if it is very cynical to say it's a Labour strike with the capital L Labour Party, it's worked because you've got Angela Rayner, old school Labour, saying she'd go on strike if she was a rail worker, and Wes Streeting, the bright young thing, the prospect of the future, also saying, were he a rail worker, he'd go on strike. Game, set and match to the Tories.
And Lisa Nandy as well. Anybody who is a potential leadership candidate for what happens if Keir Starmer gets a penalty notice for his campaigning in Durham last year, or was it the year before? I've slightly lost track now. But yeah, there's a bit of posturing going on in the Labour Party, and of course, I'm afraid the media are playing the government's game to a large extent by paying a lot of attention to it. But I mean, this is essentially the government's problem, and the government has to solve it.
Well, the media aren't paying enough attention to Sir Keir Starmer's problems and curries because they're so focused on Boris Johnson and parties.
No, the media are paying too much attention to Labour's positions on the strikes, which is all just leadership. I mean, internal Labour Party leadership positioning, and not enough attention is being paid to Grant Shapps' responsibility for sorting out the strikes. Because the government, I mean, perhaps Grant Shapps can't sort out the strikes, and so he's just engaged in sort of distraction tactics. But he really ought to be getting to grips with it.
OK, I've got that point and parked it there. I want to take you back to one thing about the RMT, because as you know, I used to be an industrial correspondent and remember the glorious days of Sid Wheel at the RMT and ASLEF and the rest of it. The RMT of nowadays famously withdrew from backing the Labour Party and are now a kind of fascinating mix of old school Stalinists and young trots coming up. It's not the RMT that I used to know, but it's definitely not. It's not a child of the Labour Party anymore either.
This is, that was the next point I was going to make. It is absurd for Grant Shapps to pretend that this is the Labour Party's problem when the RMT is not even affiliated to the Labour Party. And as you say, like many unions, it's been taken over by sectarians of the Trotskyist or Stalinist left. Quite difficult to tell the difference these days. And has fallen so far from its greatness that it's no longer affiliated. Unlike Unite, which has similar sectarian problems but is still affiliated with the Labour Party. So it's not. This is a political. There's an awful lot of small politics in sort of left-wing sectarian circles about this. Much of which is nothing to do with the Labour Party.
The final point on this, and it genuinely intrigues me because people coming across their first and biggest rail strike for quite some time, those of us of our vintage, although I know I'm older than you, but you know what I'm saying, will observe that this is something of unfinished business from the Thatcher era, in the sense that you can have one really vital industry, the railways, that is dominated by just a couple of unions. And therefore, if they, ASLEF, RMT and TSSA, to rather overgild the TSSA, Lily, but the clerks and ticket people, if they decide to go on strike, a whole industry is crippled.
Yes, well, it didn't work for Arthur Scargill at a time when the mining industry was actually quite significant. And I'm afraid, the blunt truth is that the railway industry is not, it's not so central to the national economy. That it gives these unions a stranglehold. So I'm afraid all they will succeed in doing is driving people onto the roads, taking to their cars and gumming up London's public transport. And I'm afraid that is not going to be, a heroic general strike on the model of 1926. It's not even going to be an unsuccessful Arthur Scargill miners' strike of the 1980s. It's, it is going to be unsuccessful, and therefore the government needs to make that clear at a very early stage.
The final point, and briefly, John, if you'd be so kind, doesn't Sir Keir also need to make his position clearer if it does come to that? Because otherwise, whether it's a cynical media or a knife-sharpened government, he and his party and his opposition are the ones that are going to come out of it badly.
Well, no, I'd like to see him do that. But as I say, I think this is the government's responsibility, and he needs to make that clear. But possibly the only way he can make that clear is by adopting a quite hard line approach against the strike, which would then throw the problem back to the government. Because as long as the Labour Party can't decide whether it's for or against these strikes, then the government is just going to try and exploit that division.
John, always a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed for finding time for us this Saturday afternoon. John Rentoul there, Chief Political Commentator for The Independent. Plenty more still to come this afternoon on Alastair Stewart and Friends. After the break, tens of thousands of people are marching today in protest over the government's handling of the cost of living crisis. All of that to come, but first, let's bring you up to date with the weather.
Looking ahead to this afternoon, and the UK is looking showery at times with some sunny spells and strong winds in the far north. Let's take a look at the details. Southwest England will be cloudiest in the north and west, with the risk of showery rain, drier in the south with some sunny spells. It'll be largely dry for the southeast of England with some warm sunny spells, winds strengthening through the afternoon with highs of around 28 along the south coast. Cloudy across South Wales with outbreaks of showery rain, heavy at times. A cooler day than yesterday, with highs around 17 degrees Celsius. A mostly dry afternoon for the northwest of England with sunny spells, turning cloudier from the southeast later on with the chance of 1 or 2 light showers. A fine and dry afternoon in the northeast of England with plenty of summer sunshine and light winds. Despite the sunshine, temperatures will be down on yesterday, staying at around 18 Celsius. A windy afternoon across southern Scotland with scattered light showers and sunny spells. Most of the sun will be towards East Lothian and Fife. It'll be a dry afternoon for most in Northern Ireland, but a few isolated showers creeping in from the west. It'll be breezy here with some sunny spells. Cloudy with outbreaks of rain continuing in the south, staying windy with showers for Scotland, mostly fine in between, and that's how the weather's shaping up for the rest of the day.
Join me, Darren Grimes, for Real Britain every Saturday and Sunday from 2 p.m. A news hour that comes with a trigger warning. Scorching hot opinion with prominent guests saying the unsayable, and a little bit of weekend fun thrown in. Unlike other broadcasters, I won't be forgetting what the B in our name stands for. So howie in for Real Britain Saturday and Sunday from 2 p.m.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV,
on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
we're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello and welcome back. It's exactly 28 minutes past 1 and you're watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and friends here on GB News. As you heard in Bethany's news a little earlier, thousands are taking to the streets in London today in protest over the government's handling of the cost of living crisis. It's organised by the TUC, individual trade unions and frontline workers. And individual unions. Frontline workers are among those protesting amid harrowing evidence, they say, of the impact of soaring inflation on families. Well, our own culture and social affairs editor, Inia Flarin Iman, is there at the demonstrations. We heard from you a little earlier on. What's happening right now? Is it still calm and relatively peaceful? It looked as if it was earlier.
Yeah, thank you, Alistair. It's picked up quite a lot since it began at 12 p.m. There's approximately about 10,000 people that we've counted over here at the demonstrations today. And as you mentioned in the introduction, this is a demonstration organised by the Trade Union Congress against the rising cost of living. We've had many different unions here, Unite, Unison, Equity, NEU, from all across the country and many different sectors across the country. They're demanding better pay and conditions, particularly in light of the cost of living crisis, which includes rising energy prices and the national insurance hike. But we've also seen other groups. There's been the Socialist Workers' Party, various different communist groups, and also many pro-EU and pro-refugee groups organising and gathering here today.
I just want to explain to folk, it doesn't matter to folk who are listening to our conversation in on radio, but those watching us on television will realise that they're seeing far too much of me and not enough of you. We can hear you loud and clear, but unfortunately we're not getting the picture feed from where you are. So I just want you to be aware of that so that you know what folk at home are actually getting. So my second question was really about what I said in the introduction. So this is a TUC, a nationally organised event, but also individual trade unions have chipped into it. I was just talking to John Rentle from The Independent about the RMT threatening national strike. Have these people chosen to go on a demonstration rather than strike to make their point, or is it both?
I think for many people it is a bit of both. We have seen the RMT union here, and as you have mentioned previously, that we are expecting more strikes that will affect the transport industry over the next few days. But there are many people just demonstrating, showing their solidarity with workers, and this does come as Chief Secretary to the Treasury, Simon Clarke, has mentioned that, for example, many workers cannot expect that their salary be matched with the rising inflation. But many people here that we've spoken to have said that actually workers should not have to pay the burden or fit the bill for international issues such as the energy crisis or things that are outside of their control, and that will give them a real terms pay cut. So they're calling for a new deal for workers, which is in line with inflation, pay increase and also better pay and conditions. And just behind me, as hopefully you can see, there are people with banners and flags. We've seen many people criticising Boris Johnson and the Conservative government, but we've also seen banners that are saying refugees welcome, many others just talking about the fact that workers should be uniting around this issue. So there are many different views and many different political issues, but what unites people here is a frustration about the cost of living.
You know, great to hear those arguments and explanations, and I'm so sorry we couldn't see them, but we will work upon that, and if we can, we may pop back to have another quick word before the end of the programme. If not, I know that you'll be there all afternoon, and we'll be reporting on other programmes. So for the time being, thank you very much indeed. Our Culture and Social Affairs editor, Inaya Folarin Iman, outside Parliament Square on that cost of living protest. You're watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and friends. We have plenty more still to come in the final half hour of the programme, and we shall start that right after this.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV,
on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
we're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no
for a little while. I'm really terribly sorry. Something absolutely at the pounding heart of it all went boomf, and we've now moved into another room where whatever went boomf is now back up and running. So, but my profuse apologies. There was no way that we could tell you what was going on because that had happened. Anyway, welcome back to Alastair Stewart and Friends here on GB News. It's just coming up to 1:45, so I've got to try and squeeze rather a lot in the next few moments. So let's get back to our Rwanda discussion, which has proved very fruitful with you, with comments on both sides of the argument, I hope you would agree, and guests on both sides of the argument. Joining me now is Stephen Wolfe, who's the director of the Centre for Migration. Well, Steve founded the think tank, the Centre for Migration and Economic Prosperity, to continue arguing for a positive view of migration that's open and welcoming, but considers the needs of nation-states' inhabitants through sensible, controlled migration policies. To be brutally honest, exactly my position, and I suspect that of many of you as well. Great to see you, Stephen. Thanks for joining us, and I apologise for keeping you waiting. What do I do if I care about humanity, especially those who are genuinely in danger, but I really want to protect my borders and I want to control migration?
Well, I think what we have to do now is carry on with the policy that the government has started with the Rwanda deportations, but consider three particular points of those areas where people are trying to frustrate it and stop it. Firstly, I would agree with one of your earlier commentators when they suggested that we should have flown the flights. It was only an interim order after all. But court procedure now takes precedence. So I would recommend that the Home Office works with the Justice Department and starts to have more court cases in a squeezed period. What I would recommend is that we have 24-hour courts dealing with these immigration cases so that we can get on top of the arguments that they're going to put forward. Secondly, I think that now we have a law and politics issue. The Conservative Party are pushing at an open door with the public by removing the Human Rights Act, withdrawing from the European Courts of Human Rights, and enacting our own Bill of Rights, where you still have the protective elements of some parts of the ECHR, but it's all governed by our own courts. And I think that's vital in the next stage of this battle. And thirdly, it's all about money. Money is crucial in this. We've seen it in the way that the lawyers can have legal aid, but we also see it with the non-governmental organisations and charities who are receiving vast amounts of money that they use to pass back to court cases like this from our local authorities and our national government. We must cease those payments immediately.
Just for folk who may have missed it, and I'm honoured that you didn't, you obviously listened to him, that your first point about fly the flight, get them out, not so much to get them out, as it were, but it was Christopher Mayer, former ambassador to both the United States and to Germany, who is basically saying it's got to be tested, bring it to a head. Have you put any of those points that you've just described there, special 24-hour courts, well, obviously you don't need to talk to them about the Bill of Rights because Priti Patel's made it pretty clear that that's what she wants to do. Are you and your think tank talking to ministers, immigration ministers, because I know you well enough to know that you know a good few of these people. What reaction are you getting?
Some very positive reaction, actually. I have been in contact with the Home Office. I put these measures to them as positive suggestions that can move the way forward, and I know that they are reflecting upon those. And during the course of the week, when I was up in London on Tuesday and Wednesday, I met with several MPs, Conservative MPs, and put the same case forward to them. And I think what they're beginning to understand very clearly on the political sense is that across the particularly northern seats, what's called the red wall seats, there is a real danger that the Conservative Party could lose, not because of Partygate, but because of the cost of living crisis and the immigration crisis, because people see the vast amounts of money being spent on the channel migrants, on the asylum system, and that's being frustrated by those who are the lawyers. So it's a pushing at an open door. And I had some very good discussions with people. I obviously wouldn't mention their names. I don't like to give away confidences. But they certainly said this is something that many in the party are now beginning to see as important, particularly the removal of the Human Rights Act and ECHR.
I'm fairly confident that it was nodded to back in the 2019 manifesto as well as a possibility. But have to put this to you as well, because one of my previous guests, who was also an immigration lawyer, was saying, and Denis McShane, former Labour MP, made the same point as well, that the real answer is not flights to Rwanda, it's to get round the table and talk to the French and cut a deal so that it can be sorted out at that level. Many of my correspondents via social media have been saying the French aren't going to do that. Christopher Mayer said we've been trying for years and years and years. It's a nonsense. This is vengeful punishment because we left the European Union. Is that just political nonsense, or does that ring a bell for you as well?
I've been involved in this since 2010. I was the first MEP to go to the camps in Calais when they were reopened. We were pushing discussions with the French then. We've provided over £300 million in funding to help their own police and protection. We know that this won't work, and there is a really important reason why. The French do, and we must recognise this, take a considerable number of migrants that are crossing because of the freedom of movement in Europe. But politically, Macron cannot be seen to be weak on immigration on those coastal towns, all of those which are strongholds of both Marie Le Pen and of the left. And if he was to say we will accept migrants coming back from the Channel to France, he would get hammered in the polls and by the public. And that is why it is not in their interests. Denis McShane, I know, has a very valid point that he wants to say and believe that the European Union can work on this and that France would do so. But unfortunately, it's failed in the past, as Sir Christopher Mayer said. It's failed when I was in the European Parliament. It's failed since we left Brexit. It would never work.
Stephen Wolfe, always a pleasure to see you. Talking down the line rather than outside Winchester Cathedral or any such place as that where we often meet up and natter. Great to see you, and thank you very much indeed for another constructive contribution to what is a really important debate. Thank you. Stephen Wolfe there, Director of the Centre for Migration. Now, you may have noticed, this is changing the subject, but we've only got about 8 minutes to go, so I think you've had enough of rail strikes and Rwanda and all the rest of it. Wanted to end on something that is a little lighter, but I hope you will enjoy. It's Sir Paul McCartney's 80th birthday today. There are some lovely pictures in the newspapers and that we've been running on various media outlets as well, including some of him performing last night in the United States with the great Bruce Springsteen, the boss. Also, it may have just caught your attention that Kate Bush has hit the #1 spot. In another nod to the longevity of quality, Kate's song Running Up the Hill, which was first released in 1985, is #1. Features in the Netflix sci-fi series Stranger Things, which may just possibly have helped it. Anyway, Kate's 63. She's knocked Harry Styles off the top, and Harry Styles is 28. So what is it about these veterans of popular music? Is it them, or is it their music, or is it the weakness of the opposition? I said to the team, can we please talk to Philip Kisley about this, culture historian, fellow Stones fan? That also helps a little bit. Because the last time you and I talked, it was about longevity of Her Majesty the Queen and whether she was actually the greatest monarch that we'd ever had. My first question to you is, we're going to see the Stones in Hyde Park next weekend, thank God, because they are the greatest rock and roll band we've ever had.
Well, I'm not going to disagree with you, Alistair, am I? It's great to see you, incidentally, again. One of the interesting things, I've been looking at the papers today and Sir Paul McCartney's 80th birthday and Kate Bush as well. I think there's something happening, isn't there, in the sense that pop culture has come of age. And I think it came of age quite a long time ago. But different kinds of people engage in pop culture now because it started as we know it in the 1950s, and it's provided a soundtrack and visual images to all of our lives. So the idea that it's only young people engage with pop culture just doesn't hold any water anymore. It's simply not true. Older people are interested in pop culture and are interested in. I first heard the Rolling Stones in the 1980s because there wasn't a huge amount around at that time, and they were just so incredibly exciting, looking back to their 60s heyday and thinking about the libertarian aspect for a young lad at that time was amazing. And absolutely followed them all the way through because they are the soundtrack to my life. And I think that's how lots of people think about pop culture now.
I'm going to interrupt, not to be rude, because I don't dispute a word of that, but again, because time is ticking down because we had a technical problem earlier on. But while you were giving that answer, soundtrack to your youth, and I've got 10 years on you as far as the Stones are concerned, one of the intriguing things is that the set lists that Ronnie Wood produces beautifully for each concert, it's a back catalogue of greats. There's very, very little there that's new. Whereas I would argue that the real upside of this story is that a whole bunch of youngsters are going to listen to Kate Bush for the first time and realise what a stunningly brilliant artist and singer she is.
Yeah, and I think that's part of one of the great things that we've got today is this idea that we've got access to all different kinds of music. And you can say there are lots of bad things about the internet and lots of bad things about the way we consume music. And there are lots of bad things for musicians. I know lots of musicians and they just don't get paid. But one of the good things is that we've got access to everything. So young people can listen to modern music and trace it back to its roots. And it's very easy to do. It's one click. It's a click on YouTube, and they've got access to all of these things. And so it's one of those things. It's almost a kind of research cultural history project for them. And they adore it. I know I teach lots of young people who are mad about Kate Bush, who are mad about the Stones, who are mad about the Beatles, who are mad about Muddy Waters and Willie Dixon and all of those people as well. So that's one fantastic aspect of the modern age.
Final point and a quickie from you, because you're the expert. But I've read an interview with Paul McCartney the other day, and he said he's still recording, he puts out a new album, he does a concert, he tries to play some of the old tracks, the new tracks, and he said all they want is Yesterday and Long and Winding Road.
Well, it's probably a little bit kind of frustrating for him, but I'm sure he appreciates what those songs mean to those people. The first time I can remember the first time I heard Long and Winding Road. It's such an incredible song. Yeah. So what he's doing as a performer is giving people those moments again, and he's allowing them to reflect on them. And of course, it's about family and friends. I'm sure when you go and see the Stones, you won't be going on your own. You might be going with children and grandchildren and so on and so forth. And I think everybody's doing that. And again, that's another fantastic aspect of this intergenerational thing.
I'm actually going with my wife, but you've just put a brilliant idea. As people who follow me on social media will know, I'm a very proud grandfather for the first time. So the idea of taking little Jim Jam along to see the Stones would be a great and perfect start to his life. Philip, it's always a genuine pleasure. We said last time we met we wanted to talk a bit about the Stones. We'll still do another one, maybe reflecting on the concert I am going to see on Saturday. But for the time being, Philip Kisley, culture historian, Leeds University, thank you very much indeed. That's all time that we have for today. Tomorrow, be here, please. I have a special interview with Her Royal Highness Katerina of Yugoslavia, and you won't want to miss that. It's about literacy, it's about books, and it's about royal families in Europe. Until then, enjoy the rest of your day and your evening. Bye-bye.
Looking ahead to this afternoon, and the UK is looking showery at times with some sunny spells and strong winds in the far north. Let's take a look at the details. Southwest England will be cloudiest in the north and west with the risk of showery rain, drier in the south with some sunny spells. It'll be largely dry for the southeast of England with some warm sunny spells, winds strengthening through the afternoon with highs of around 28 along the south coast. Cloudy across South Wales with outbreaks of showery rain, heavy at times. A cooler day than yesterday, with highs around 17 degrees Celsius. A mostly dry afternoon for the northwest of England with sunny spells, turning cloudier from the southeast later on with the chance of 1 or 2 light showers. A fine and dry afternoon in the northeast of England with plenty of summer sunshine and light winds. Despite the sunshine, temperatures will be down on yesterday, staying at around 18 Celsius. A windy afternoon across southern Scotland with scattered light showers and sunny spells. Most of the sun will be towards East Lothian and Fife. It'll be a dry afternoon for most in Northern Ireland, but a few isolated showers creeping in from the west. It'll be breezy here with some sunny spells. Cloudy with outbreaks of rain continuing in the south, staying windy with showers for Scotland, mostly fine in between, and that's how the weather's shaping up for the rest of the day.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with the